minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello, friends. Welcome in. Welcome into the discussion. Today, we are taking on a topic that makes itself known in just about every single thing that I do related to Star Citizen. There's always a comment. There's always a comment about master modes. And I've invited a former guest, fellow YouTuber, Avenger One, to join me for this talk. You've put out your own video recently about this. It has it's gotten the bees buzzing, and I'm sure there are a lot of questions and comments and things that people would like to know. So I figured I'd have you in with me, somebody who's not very combat oriented, not very pilot oriented, but is still kind of following along with the flight model development. So we could have a discussion not just about master modes, but about flight overall in Star Citizen, how you see it, what our impressions are of what CIG is trying to do with it, and just have a nice sit down. So thank you for joining me for this one, man.
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, we had a talk about this earlier in the year along with Yogi. I'll be referencing that a little bit from back then because things were, I guess, a little bit different in terms of how people perceived master modes back then, but also basically the same since they haven't really done anything with it since then. But I think, why don't we jump straight into things? I think there's a lot to get through here, and I won't dilly-dally on it. So thanks again for joining us. This is the Launch Sequence Podcast, folks. We put a weekly show out every week. Supporters can join us live in Discord if they want every Friday or Saturday. And if you really, really like this podcast, you can always subscribe for it. Now, Avenger, my friend, let's talk about flight. First question I have for you, and this is one that I've seen people kind of toss around a couple times, and I'm like, it confuses me a little bit. So I wanted to throw this to you and see what you have to say about it. Since all these changes started to come to the flight model in Star Citizen, do we still have a 6 direction of freedom flight model?
Yes.
Okay. So I get a lot of people being like, there's no more 6 DOF. And I'm like, but we do still look. Why would they be saying that?
Let me draw this real quick for you. I apologize.
Gonna draw?
Yeah. Does this come through on the screen?
Properly? Yeah, I can see he's pulling out the props.
I apologize. But it's just easier for me to explain it. Just real quick. So here's our circle. That's our SCM speed. Here's our ship in the middle. And then our afterburner speed looks more like this.
Right.
Right? Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay. So what happens is anything within this speed zone, the distances that you're engaging at, and anybody in a group fight, anything that gets within this SCM speed zone is dead instantly because of the hit scan weapons basically at those speeds. So the only times at which you can genuinely avoid fire or do any kind of positional combat whatsoever exists in this afterburner speed zone, which can only be accessed by flying like an airplane and not like a spaceship.
Okay. And that's kind of something that they've always said they wanted to do, but wasn't always true, right? Because in the older flight model, the one in since 3.0, you basically had full freedom of thrust in most directions, and it was pretty much equal.
You had all 6 DOF for the top, like all the speeds whatsoever.
Yeah.
True.
So given that they've kind of always pointed towards that being the goal they want, why is it that people are getting so frustrated that it's now the way that it is?
Well, if I had a crystal ball into everyone's mind, I could answer that question.
You don't?
I'm not sure.
Why did I bring you on the show? I thought that's what you were here for, man.
So I think the outrage comes from the type of game that you're trying to make. We were sold a space sim experience. And I've said before, I think Chris meant more of a space shooter experience. I think Star Citizen suffers from the very real, very problematic issue of marketing, and then product. So let's take the Zeus, for example. The Zeus commercial we just watched 24 hours ago
I haven't seen it.
well, I mean, you can pull it up after this then.
Yeah.
The Zeus is being marketed as this awesome, it's a beautiful ship, by the way, so great job, folks. It's flying over top of ArcCorp at about 6 times the frickin' speed in the previous model. It's just ripping past planets, or sorry, buildings super fast. It looks super cool. You're like, wow, that thing looks like a blast to fly. And then when you actually fly it, it goes about 1/10 or 1/100th what it's being advertised to fly at. Now, in the previous game mode, in terms of the way the flight worked, is we could reach some of those speeds and some of that excitement and intensity of flight that we were advertised, you could genuinely access. And what we have now is something that's just not that. You know, they believe that they're making a closer range, and that's going to be more more intense and more fun. And I argue that they kind of struck lightning before, and then they just didn't realize it for a long time. Like, there were issues with that old flight model, which we could talk about, that Master Modes does fix. But what I've always been arguing for is not the return of the old model, but instead learn from the lessons of what that model did better, and then take it into Master Modes and make the intensity of flight something that Master Modes embraces, which that's always been my position. And that's why I've always argued for, let's get higher speeds. Let's make the game feel more like a space shooting game in space, where we can much more sixed off. So our speeds for 6 degrees of freedom can be bigger, which means SCM zone's bigger. Like I showed that little illustration of, the smaller the bubble. It's just, a lot of that has to do with gunnery and all that stuff. But people are frustrated because what they've been sold and what they've been advertised are very different. And I think people, like, the demographic for Star Citizen is people between 18 and 40. That's the demographic. They're usually folks with lots of accessible cash, lots of education. I think there's a lot of folks in the Star Citizen community that are probably not, like, this isn't a Fortnite crowd. These are people that are probably careers, kids, family, things on the go. They want a deep intellectual experience, and they don't want like the next Rocket League type experience.
Dude,
and
speak for yourself. I want more dance emotes.
Okay.
There's just not enough dancing in this game.
I mean, if you want to get flossing in the game, you go right ahead. But I mean, I would much rather see a better HUD.
All right. Lot to unpack there. Let's start with this. When you say old flight model, and I've already said that too, you're referring to the 3.x patches, right? Of flight model.
Correct.
Because there is also
typically past 315.
Okay.
Right.
So you're saying 315 to 322 flight model, let's say 3, 3.0 to 315 flight model 2, pre 3.0 flight model 1. I know there's more
the original
way
flight
back
model
there,
was
but
0.8. Then we had the actual flight model in 1.1 to 1.6 or something like that, and then 2.0, and then you had the 3.0 originals, and then you had 314 or 311 or something like that, or 312, and then you had the model that we all fell in love with at like 315, I think, or something like that. I can't remember the numbers right off the top of my head, but it's around that zone. And now we have the 4th iteration of the flight model, and that's Master Modes.
So what I find interesting is that when 3.0 came out, rather, we were well into the 3.0 patches, 3.8, 3.9, 3.10, whatever. A lot of people were still at that point like, hey, I miss the old flight model. Like, this is not good. I want to go back to 2.6.4. That was the golden era. That was the great times. I
remember 2.6.
do you agree with that? Do you still think that 2.6 was better than what we've had over the last few years?
I think at the time, 2.6 was the best iteration of the model, and people just wanted to go back to what they preferred. I liked 2.6. I wasn't like super crazy about it, but it was better. It was certainly better than Master Modes. But it was fundamentally built different. It was all 6 degrees of freedom without any kind of asymmetrical zones. And so what you had was what we were used to in 322, just at a lower speed cap. And I think with a better jerk profile, so ships couldn't wiggle the same way like they could. I mean, are you asking me if I'd want to go back to 2.6? Is that what you're saying?
I'm just trying to understand a little bit more of what people preferred, what somebody like yourself who considers, that kind of hardcore PvP experience to be the epitome of Star Citizen gameplay. Like, where was it at its best?
Hold on a second. So you said that assuming I expect Star Citizen PvP to be the epitome of the experience. I just want to unpack that real quick. So what do you mean by that? Like that I only like PvP and that's like what I think is the most be all end all thing? Is that
No.
the idea?
No, but it seems like that is what you specifically like to gear for.
I do like to gear for that, but I think people get me a bit twisted on this, and this could be an example. It's like, yeah, I'm known for PvP, but I genuinely really like a lot of the other stuff, if not almost more than dogfighting. I just haven't been active doing that stuff as much. I would like to be honestly on the bridge of a ship as much or more than in the cockpit of a fighter, but the multi-crew just is simply not in that place to facilitate that experience yet. But
okay, no,
sorry, can you ask your question again? I apologize because I went off.
Well,
on that
as somebody who at least right now is doing a lot of dogfighting, where would you say was the best that dogfighting was?
In the 322, okay. That those patches, 318, 322, that flight model was a lot deeper, a lot more exciting. Which was funny because it originally started and people were angry with it. They're like, "Oh, this thing is so easy and it's just not the same." And as time went on, it got much different. But unlike master modes, time went on and it got better, like fine wine. Whereas master modes, time has gone on and it's just gone downhill, 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 down because people are starting to realize they can see that glass ceiling. Even people that were typically not super active in the space are starting to see it now, whereas previously they didn't have any concept of how high the ceiling went.
Well, you said Master Modes has gone downhill, but have they made any changes since 323?
Yeah, they've made a bunch of balance changes. If you call them changes, I don't personally think they're meaningful changes. We had a couple small changes back during I guess you could say the cycles that they're claiming where they put Master Modes out to the PTU and stuff. But there has been no substantial fundamental changes, which is fine per se to some degree. Although I personally disagree with the fact that their their reason for not working on the flight model is because apparently will endanger other projects, that they don't have enough time because of CitizenCon, or that they just don't have the manpower to facilitate this stuff. And I personally, I'm having trouble understanding that logic. It is the fundamental system that which ties all ships and gameplay components and loops together is how the ships fly and function. To say that that's not important, I don't really understand where that's coming from.
Well, hold on. We'll get back to that. But I'm my point of asking that was from what I remembered over the summer, they didn't want to actually make any changes to master modes until 4.0. And
Correct.
So it doesn't seem like they've really had the chance to actually iterate on it that much to improve it.
Correct, to some degree. But I think where the lightning rod of this comes from is people don't have faith, including myself, in the direction that CIG is taking with combat. And they haven't, for whatever reason, been able to address that there are fundamental issues with the way they're designing the system, and they just say, "Oh, we'll figure it out." And it's like, I'm sick and tired of being told, "Yeah, we'll figure it out," and then having them come up with a flight model and it not be fixed, and again and again and again. Multi-crew ships, for example, have been largely ineffective since they've ever been in the game.
Spoken like a true Star Citizen.
Well, it's depressing to me because these issues aren't based on the ship doesn't have enough hit points, or the guns don't do enough damage, or the balance of the ship's turn rate is this. These aren't the problems that are causing these ships to be a big joke. What's causing the problem is a geometric issue, which is a fundamental understanding issue in terms of design, right? So my issues have been with the design of the system, not the small little tunings. Oh, this ship needs to be this, and that. Even though I have input on the tunings, it's just we're not going to have a game. Like, we're just not going to have a game if multi-crew ships are not effective.
But they haven't done anything with multi-crew ships, right? Like that's why I'm so excited for engineering. It seems like the first time they've actually cared about multi-crew ships being multi-crew ships.
And it won't do a goddamn thing. And here's why. Because it doesn't matter whether you have the Maelstrom system in, it doesn't matter whether you have engineering systems in. In fact, it's actually a detriment, right? Because it takes longer for you to do stuff now. You actually have to have more people to be effective. And what's going to happen, mark my words, is unless they start to realize that they have these geometrical issues with the flight model, you're just going to get surrounded by fighters and they're always going to stay outside of range and you're just going to die slowly. That's what's going to happen.
And you think that they are not considering that?
Well, if they are considering it, it's totally like gone under the radar for 10 years. And, you know, and it's just, this is what I mean by like losing faith in CIG, you know, and I don't want to sound like an asshole here, even though people are going to put me in that box. You know, it's great that CIG puts out these videos and they talk about the stuff that they're changing, and they bring all these devs on who most people have never seen, and they oh, who's this person working on it? But, you know, when you have devs talking about how they were never able to fly in formation, and now with master modes they can fly with their buddies and stuff, it just kind of makes people feel like, you know, if you're designing a race car, you want race cars drivers to design it, right? You want engineers who've maybe worked with racing teams to design it. You don't want the guy down the road who, I don't know, worked for Tim Hortons for 10 months and then he's, you know, just really likes watching YouTube videos on racing to just design a car. And I know that sounds mean to say, but it's like the results speak for themselves, because if we had people who fundamentally understood these problems, we wouldn't be having these issues. Multi-crew ships would be a lot more effective. They'd be a lot more fun. They wouldn't just be range kited into oblivion from every fighter that we have. And we would always like have a healthy amount of choice between different ships to actually have them be fun. Now, I understand that people are going to take this example I'm using and say, well, that only, you know, for PvP, this and that, but this is across the board, right? Whether it's for PvE and all that stuff. So I don't want to live in a world where the game is just not fun anymore because only a small group of ships can actually do the job. You know, even if that's only accessible by the top 1%. See, I don't want that. I don't want the top 1% of people accessing these ships and doing everything. I don't know. It's highly frustrating from my point of view. And I'm not the only one. There's a lot of people who feel the same way, who feel a little bit lied to and a little bit kind of taken for a ride. And the worst part is like, it's like we get screamed at and told we're wrong and that we should, shut the fuck up and just go somewhere else. And it's just like, this isn't just me who has this problem, because like other people are seeing this problem too in the universe. I'm ranting again, but
you said something key there, and I kind of want to hone in on that. Is the most important thing in this for you skill expression or fun combat?
I think they go hand in hand. I don't think one happens without the other.
Skill expression and dogfighting or fun combat?
Again, they go both hand in hand. And it wouldn't just be skill expression and dogfighting. It'd be in all ships and multi-crew, not just dogfighting. And this is the problem, right? Like, I am not advocating for, we must, you know, herald in an age of elite dogfighters that can do everything. And it's never but what I've been for. It's never what I'm trying to advocate for. I want skill-based combat that fits in with the larger picture of Star Citizen, so that all ships can compete in a PvP space or a PvE space and have genuinely effective results.
But the overall goal of master modes, from what I've gained, is slowing down the combat speeds. And I know there's some, you know, there's an argument to be had about how much it should slow it down, what's the proper speed. But ultimately, it does seem like the game becomes more fun overall in terms of combat when dogfighters aren't flying as fast, because then you have different things, different strategies that you can use that rely on ships still being where you expect them to be 5 seconds after that moment, right? Whether it's E-War, whether it's turrets, whatever it might be, catching a ship in a certain place because it's flying at 400 meters per second instead of 1400 meters per second seems like it creates a more fun environment for the overall battlefield rather than just the people flying the fast ships.
Yeah, I fundamentally disagree with that statement.
Why is that?
And the reason for that is because I think what you're saying, and this is what I'm saying. So this is how I interpret it: is you're saying if we're gonna have fun combat, I have to be able to identify my target, engage it within a reasonable amount of time, and then not have it just always be super speeding around me, and I could just never actually participate in the fight. Would that be an accurate example?
To an extent, yeah.
Right? And you're assuming that lower speeds would give you access to this gameplay.
Yeah.
Assuming that because of this, then you would be more effective in combat, which means you're having more fun because you're not just being taken for a ride.
Not even effectiveness, just the idea that I can see what the heck's going on.
Right. Also visually, right? So let me explain it this way, because this is a good example here. If we exist in a spaceship environment world, where we want simulation and we want believable experiences, we want cinematic combat, and we want something that is relatively high skill ceiling so people can really engage. Is that the environment that we want? Is that correct?
I do not believe we're going to get a good sim out of this if they continue to try and capture the audience they need to keep development going. I've swallowed that. I'm not happy with it. It's not what I originally thought we were getting when we started, but I realized some time ago that we will have simulative parts of the game, but I don't think it's going to be as sim as what we thought when we were heading into 3.0, for instance.
Okay. So I like where your head's at. You got the compromise idea going on. Now, do you want something at least believable? Do you want something that you can look at and be like, yeah, that feels like it could, Okay. Well, the problem we have with the system is forcing everything close by is in space, it's all relative. So what's close range to you may not be close range to something else. And the way that the ships are designed, there's so much going on. It really is a little bit of an impossible task. So I really feel bad for Yogi. But at the same time, because you have a lot of these folks at CIG that are doing art-driven game design instead of like practical, like if they design the ships a certain way, it would make a lot more sense. Now, we have this problem where we design ships and we don't really design them for the space of combat. We just design them because they look cool and we shove a bunch of stuff in them. And then combat's kind of like this afterthought, like, yeah, we'll figure it out later, right? And that leaves a lot of holes in the design of anything. And when it comes to combat, you can pick those holes and expand them and make them a lot worse. So if you force combat speeds really low to gain this advantage of we want really close range fighting and this, that, and the other, it's not having the intended effect that CIG is looking for. Like, yes, the overall macro space, like I was talking about in the video, is slightly like closer range now because you can't just distance yourself at 1200 meters per second. But combat engages because of turn rates and weapon speeds and velocities have pushed the combat out past the 400 meter mark. So you're actually engaging from longer range in your gun sights, and it just doesn't have the effect you're looking for, especially not cinematically. And what you've sacrificed is so much of the game's depth and simulation, and I guess you could say plausible believability in replacement for this kind of like on rails cinematic feel. And I think that's just not worth it, man. Like, it's just not. And it doesn't have the effect you're talking about. Because you're saying in your question, like, I want to be able to like see my target and engage it. Well, there's ways to get there without dropping the speeds to basically biplane speeds. And a lot of it has to do with accelerational balancing and allowing the space at which fighters engage in to be able to exist. Okay, think of it this way. If you go from 0 to your speed wall in 2 seconds, okay? That's equivalent to like going to a go-kart track, getting in a go-kart and hitting the speed button and off you go, right?
Mm.
Now, do you feel like you're going super fast in a go-kart, going 40 kilometers an hour?
I mean, yeah.
Okay. Now, if you get into a big Ford F550 and you're going 50 kilometers an hour, do you feel like you're really going fast?
Not as fast.
Okay. So what's the difference there?
Size.
It's perspective and size, right? It's design. If I get into a big truck and I go big truck, go vroom, I drive 50 kilometers an hour, I don't feel like I'm going fast. But if I sit myself in a small little, go-kart and I'm blasting around at 50 kilometers an hour, it feels like I'm really trucking. And that perspective is similar to what's going on with like today's dogfighting space. Is you have these massive ships, you have these insanely fast accelerations that reach the speed walls right away, and you're creating this like effect where it doesn't feel intense. It doesn't feel like you're getting that cinematic experience because you're constantly bumping up on those speed walls. And so things feel slow because you haven't given space for the acceleration to actually take place, to build speed, to build energy, to actually fly. Because flight has a lot to do with managing momentum. That's most of flight is just managing your momentum, right? And your attack angles and movements. And obviously in space, we don't have that because it's space. You can just go wherever you want. It's based on your thruster power. So
this sounds like a balance issue then.
it's always been a balance issue, but balance also with design, not just in terms of the numbers on the ships.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. But this sounds like something that can be solved within master modes.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. See, here's the thing. People always put me in this box. And
I feel like I'm going to clip you saying that and just send it to every person on every comment that ever says, get rid of master modes. Please, leave me alone.
I know. It's super frustrating, but
I'm not making the game. We're just covering it.
Excuse me, Mr. Tomato. It's a big topic. A lot of people feel betrayed. And that's the thing is like guys like me are willing to stand up and take the public stoning and banana throwing and name calling for the better part of 5 years now, because I genuinely care about the game. I care about the experience. And I care about the people. And there's like this weird tribalism that goes on where people are like, "Oh, Avenger One is a white knight." Like the top comment on my recent video was, "I hate Avenger One, but he's right." And it's like, well, why do you hate him? It's like he was a white knight and he shot me down in the PU. And I was like,
well,
anyway.
I think, and we talked about this a little bit before the podcast. This is such a big topic in Star Citizen in general, and probably just about everything. There is a way to do feedback. Now, this isn't directed at you, but the way that people act when you bring up, I want to say anything, but when you bring up the flight model or master modes is a sense of nothing matters because they did this. And I know that there are ways for us to deliver feedback to the team so that they can actually get this into a place. And I didn't get into tons of detail with the post that Yogi made, which is kind of what led to, you making your video and this podcast. But in that thread, I know he acknowledged some of the things that were problems when it comes to the balance, when it comes to the feeling, the fact that, like you said, it doesn't feel as intense. The speeds don't really feel as fun. And continue to weigh into that and see if they can change that in the long term 4.0 and beyond. And what I think a lot of people end up kind of cornering the group of people who are not happy about master modes on is the fact that it's a sonic onslaught of we don't like master modes over the last 5 months when there's not really been that much actually done with it yet.
Right. I think that comes from two things. One, it's fear. And I hate to say it, but it's well-founded fear. And two, it's this it's this desire to want to get a better experience. And the fact is, we're never going to have something that everybody enjoys. That's true. Okay. But everyone's pulling their own way. It's like almost become a political issue. It's almost like Master Modes has become politicized, and it's disgusting because
it is election year.
I'm arguing. Yeah, maybe there's a connection there. I'm arguing on the facts basis side. Like, I have my own personal feelings about it, and I try my best, especially in the most recent video, to try and leave my feelings at the door. Unless I was to like really drive home a specific point that, because a lot of video games is about designing a feeling. That's what you are. You're a company that designs an emotion, and you're trying to give people that emotion, that feeling of wonder, of excitement, of joy, of struggle and success and victory. You're designing that experience, and I'm coming from the point of view, like, if you want to have that experience of feeling like the victor and all that stuff, Master Modes kind of takes a lot of that away. And here's why. And I use the reasons. And again, my perspective is from the dogfighting side mostly. But I can empathize with a lot of the other folks that are doing trading, hauling, and that kind of stuff. That the folks around Master Modes have become increasingly more rabid, I think, including other members of the community, which I'm not going to name, because a lot of them feel lied to, right? And that, like I said before, a lot of it comes to like the marketing. We were sold this, and then we have an experience. And going from something objectively better, even though it had problems, but going from a system that was objectively better in a lot of ways, to a system that is just simply not as good. And then what really set this whole thing off was, and I didn't like this conversation, I don't think is about Yogi. And people are saying Yogi should get fired and this and that. It's like, you guys need to calm down. Like, honest to God. And I mean this from the bottom of my heart. You're lucky to have Yogi, guys. Like, you really are, because
he's passionate.
Yogi is a developer given a task and a job. So he must complete that task and job. It is not his duty to, I guess you could say, change the vision of Star Citizen. If you've got a problem with the way the game is functioning and working, that means you have a problem with Mr. Roberts, not Yogi. There's a very clear difference there. And, unfortunately, Yogi is become a target in the community because he goes on podcasts. He goes and talks to the community. It's not surprising to me that Mr. Roberts hasn't had a public appearance in the community in like 9 years. Like, he just doesn't come out and meet the fans. Like, he comes on at CitizenCon, he'll shake some hands and smile, but he doesn't come on podcasts. He doesn't talk to us. He doesn't do 10 for the chairmans like he used to. He mostly just kind of does his thing. And people say, oh, he's busy doing Squadron 42 and stuff. And I think it's largely due to the fact that he is busy, but also he just doesn't care about people's opinions of how the game should be and all that stuff. He's got his vision, and he wants to make that vision. And that's fine. But there's a problem where the game that you're designing in a multiplayer space doesn't work the way you envision it. Like, if you go back and play the old like Freelancer Privateer, like, remember that game, Freelancer 1 and 2?
I didn't get to play it. I know about
go
it.
After this, go watch some videos on it, because it's really cute. Actually, it looks like Master Modes. It's got an afterburner system. It's got the strafing and the SCM bubble. Essentially, it's got the gimbals on the ships. It's like a really, really rudimentary like version of Star Citizen. And that is a single player game, and it works for single player to some degree, right? But Freelancer was never heralded as a great experience back then because of its flight model. It was heralded as a good experience because of what it offered and the cool things you could do, but it never went down to history as like, wow, that was like the space sim of a generation.
Do you think that Star Citizen is trying to be heralded for its flight model? I
don't see how it can't afford not to.
Well, go for the same overall experience, kind of like Freelancer did. Like,
you could.
I personally didn't even consider the flight model when I joined in, right? When I joined in, I was like, oh, trading and like doing different things and landing in space stations and all this stuff. Yeah, like just living in space. And I sometimes wonder, with a game that needs to be so many different things, from like literally a planet safari provider to a space station engineer to a pirate in some far off asteroid base, and then also to a dogfighter in a ship and a freaking captain in a capital class destroyer, like to a game trying to do all of these different things, can it do any one of those things so good that it defines that genre?
Can it? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I don't think it can afford not to.
And you think the flight model is where it needs to do that?
Yeah, I think the design of the flight model fixes some issues on paper, but it's all about execution, right? And in a single player experience, yeah, you could make what we have work, but it's just substandard, you know? It's just not it's not playing to your demographic, I think personally. You know, like I said before, Star Citizen is largely people between 18 and 40 to 45, you know, and it's largely a male audience. And the folks that buy and play this game want something deep and engaging that they can sink their teeth into for many, many, many years to come. And you're just not going to have that with a rudimentary flight model that just doesn't hold people's attention. Look at games like Starfield. You know, nobody plays that game for the flight model.
Dude, that game has an amazing flight model. What are you talking about?
Oh yeah, totally, super fun.
I love the loading part.
The loading part. Right?
I'm sorry.
You know, so much of what you do. So like, think about it this way. Did you ever play Skyrim?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you like Skyrim's combat movement and gameplay system? The swords, the shield, the magic,
Not really. I don't
really?
know why I liked
Okay.
it. Like I
know
enjoyed
why?
Skyrim.
Okay, you enjoyed Skyrim. So hold on. So
I'm a big picture kind of guy, I guess.
okay, totally. But think about it deeper here, right? What's one of your favorite games?
Halo.
Okay, why did you love Halo so much? Was it Master Chief?
I think I have a book around here that I wrote that down. A novel.
But I'd like to hear this.
Dude, why did I like Halo so dang?
Think about it deeply.
Honestly, I mean the gameplay is a big part of it, right? The rock paper scissors style of that gameplay, the shooting melee grenade, the way that it worked against different enemies in different categories, but also the freaking story. The story was good. It was solid. You know, it had pulled the heartstrings, had some great set pieces. Oh, the music. My man, Marty. Like, dude, I could just keep going.
Okay, this is good. I'm going to be using more Halo examples because you seem to resonate well with that. So
I like Halo.
I loved Halo too, but Halo's flight model was the Spartan suit and the time to kill and how the weapons handled and how the gameplay was and the grenades and how they bounced and all that stuff. That core pillar of the experience, coupled with the music, the set design, the character development, brought an experience that became world renowned as being one of the greatest games ever made. Now, Star Citizen is in a place where we were getting close to that Halo spot in terms of gameplay. There you go, my man, right?
Yeah.
And instead, we went from almost getting to that Halo spot, like it's got to rough some edges, we got to learn some things, we got to fix some things, you know, to what's a bad FPS shooter that nobody really likes? Actually, this is a better question. If you got really good at Halo, how many kills could you get? You could feel like a real hero, right? You get the force hammer, you get the sword, goofing around. You know what I mean? Get
all
like
I needed
15.
was a DMR, man.
Yeah, okay. And how many kills you get before they finally took you out? Sometimes like 20 kills, you know, something crazy,
Yeah,
right?
it could be solid. Could be good times. Yeah.
Now, what if Bungie came back and said, you know what? At 3 kills, the BR just blows up in your hand and you die because you can't kill more than 3 people. just doesn't,
Okay, but you just said that didn't you say, I think it was in your video, you said you still can, right?
Right, I can to some degree, but it's mostly in a very gimmicky, non-fun way, right? And this is one of the problems. This is one of the problems I was talking about. Think about it this way. If you design an experience and you claim that it's met that goal and it doesn't meet that goal, and I can empirically prove that all the time, then what you're saying is false, right? And this is a very difficult thing for me to say because I like Yogi. I really do. I consider him a friend. I really like him. But what that post was when he put that out, I personally think was just wrong because they're claiming, and I don't think it's just Yogi, it's the whole team behind this. It's like they claim all these things. It's like a narrative. They're like, oh, Master Moses achieved all these things. And clearly it hasn't. And a lot of people feel betrayed and lied to, and they're frustrated and they're upset, and they don't know where else to go. Like they don't know who else to turn to. They don't know who else to. They've complained. They've given their feedback, and it's largely been met with, people like Jared on the Inside Star Citizen or Star Citizen Live, basically talking down to them and being like, oh, don't be angry and stuff. And it's like, you're gaslighting people. You gaslight your own community. And it just doesn't fly with people anymore because a lot of these folks have been around for a long time. Star Citizen's not getting deluges of new people. They're getting people that have left and then come back and kind of open the door and we're like, what's going on here? And then, ooh, no, it's not ready. Let's get out of here. It's not like they're getting tons and tons of new people. So you got to respect your core fan base that supports the project. I don't know.
Can I go back to the Halo metaphor real quick?
Go ahead.
Bungie did the same thing. After Halo 1, they changed the shields. They changed the med packs. They changed the time to kill. They added gadgets in Reach. They added dual wielding in 2. They added, I guess 343 added sprint, but like the same thing happened with that game. They were chasing an experience to try and continue to almost complicate things to balance it out more.
So I like this. I like where you're going with this. Did you think the gameplay got harder or easier from Halo 1 to 2?
Harder.
Okay, so the
I
increased.
didn't play much multiplayer in Halo 1, so I can't speak towards that as much. But I will say that they gave us more tools in Halo 2 that made it feel more complex.
Well, there was definitely a lot more competition and a lot more competitiveness in Halo 2 than Halo 1.
Yeah.
And it only got more complex and more difficult and more.
They saw that Xbox Live and they were like, let's go.
Okay, right? So what we have here is an example of, first of all, Halo. I'd say the large part of why Halo sold so many copies was a large part due to the fact that it had very strong multiplayer. Would you not agree?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So games like Halo increase in their skill cap. They don't decrease in their skill gap as the subsequent games come out. And now we have Halo Guardians, not Guardians, Halo, what was
Infinite
it?
now.
Infinite, yeah. Which I would say is, I guess you could say the opus grandis of, or is it opus grande? I don't know. I'm trying to sound smart here. It doesn't work for me.
I wouldn't call it either of those
guy.
things for Halo. I mean, it's a good game, but they're meandering a little bit.
Okay. Why do you think? Oh, this is here. Let's break this down real quick. Do you think they're meandering? Like, just real quick. Why do you think they're meandering? Is it in story? Is it in gameplay? Is it multiplayer? What is it?
All the above.
Okay. Well, it seems like this is a much larger topic.
It is a big topic, man. Time. I could have a whole podcast about this. Yeah. But like, let's just take the gameplay part of it. It's meandering, I think, because it's trying to stay relevant. And I could see Star Citizen having a similar problem in the sense that what we started with in Star Citizen, a lot of people don't want to hear this. People be saying stuff about cargo hauling. People will probably say the same thing about engineering. Star Citizen started out as a very complex and hardcore kind of design of a game. Death of a spaceman, physicalized stuff, even the flight model, all of those things were very focused. And as the game has grown, it needs more funding. It's bigger, you know, and they've gotten to this point where they are stuck building a game that needs a proper amount of funding to complete the game. And for that to happen, it has to be able to appeal to more people in more ways. And I think that means that the game design has to change to some extent. And for that reason, I can see where the gameplay changes not based on the vision, but based on keeping the vision alive.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm willing. I'm willing to be like fair played because I want the best experience. I really do. I realize that Star Citizen will never be that hyper hardcore space shooter dogfighter game that I've been wanting for, and that's okay. That's okay. But for the game to flounder and not step into its full potential is really what I am not happy with. And I really truly believe that master modes, the way it's implemented, is not stepping into the potential of the game. And what's worse is the direction that CIG is taking it and their inability to acknowledge its flaws is the very distressing part of this problem that I think a lot of people are picking up on. And when it comes to guys like me, I voice my concern and I expose it for what it is. And people see that and go like, you know, he's got a point. Like, you're claiming all these big things, multiplayer numbers, that and stuff. And it just, from my point of view, it's not true. It's not true. You know, I mean, you said yourself, the activity you've seen in the game has been at a real low. Now, there's obviously natural highs and lows throughout the year, but I know for me, I've never seen it so low. And if you go to some of these, there's a website that we were looking at recently. I can't remember the name of it. I have to pull it up here, but it's a bunch. It's like it shows the amount of logins that Star Citizen's been having, and it's by thousands and thousands of users who basically put their hand up. So it's like 100,000 or something users or more that have basically self-proclaimed to give their data in terms of when they've logged on and that kind of stuff. And the numbers, you know, they go up when a patch comes out and then they just like steeply drop off. And you can see like some patches that are better than others, the retention's much higher. But this, like the most recent stuff, like when you can clearly see the graph when master mode starts to hit PTU and the community starts to get their hands on it. You can see that graph start to taper off and down. And now it's
Yeah,
hit
but
like an all-time low.
I mean, I'm sure Master Modes has something to do with that. And golly gee, I bet the comments will go ahead and confirm. But I do believe that 323 was put on a pedestal because of CitizenCon, because of the ending of 2023, and because of the beginning of 24. The hype was huge. And then a patch comes out, and really it's filled with a lot of quality of life adjustments, things that change the systems we've already had. And it was realized that, oh, wait, the game's still, this is the same game. Like, maybe I should wait.
Well, it's not just that it's the same game. Like, I think this was this was way worse than 318. I hate to say it, you know, in terms of server stability and all this stuff going on. Like, it was just really brutal. And, you know,
we used to log in.
yeah, we've been taking L's as a community for the last couple years, you know, and
Has it only been that long?
It's there gets a point where the amount of new folks coming in doesn't outweigh the amount of people walking away and getting bitter and frustrated about the whole process. And now that we're Chris comes out and says we're feature complete, like we're ready, you know, it's like I feel like I'm having a flashback from like 2016 when he walked up on stage with Mark Hamill and said, "Next year we're gonna have Squadron 42," and I was like, "Yeah, that's not happening." You know, and it's like, look, I'm not trying to say that Chris is trying to pull the wool over people's eyes or there's a scam. Like, I'm not one of those folks, right? Like, it's a game, it's a company, they're trying their best. But I feel like there's enough evidence to show that what they're doing isn't working and they're kind of just spinning their wheels. You know, like for example, if you buy a ship and you want it to be fun and engaging, and You just can't. Like, for example, a constellation against 2 Buccaneers that know what they're doing, you could have Avenger One in that constellation and you wouldn't stand a chance because mechanically it's just not possible to win that fight. And this is basically the case for almost every multi-crew ship in the game. And this fundamental flaw is based on a design issue, not a tuning issue. And it's been in the game since the very beginning. And so we get these new flight models with these new patches and these new changes, and they don't fix the core issue.
Okay.
And,
So
and that,
no, go ahead. Sorry.
but that bitterizes people is what I'm saying, right? And people notice that over time. Now, I'll notice it a little faster than the general public because I'm in that space 24/7. But it becomes a problem when the general public starts to be like, hey, wait a minute, and then people get angry and bitter because they're like, wait, this problem's been in since like 2014 when we first started flying around.
So you're drawing attention away from master modes as being the problem and more of the overall way that ships in the game work, specifically multi-crew ships versus dogfighters.
Master modes is just another iteration on a long line of failed attempts to solve a fundamental issue.
And that is
Geometry.
so
Range. Here, I'll draw it out for you.
Wait.
Wait.
I wanna stay on that line of thought. If master modes is a failed iteration on another type of flight to make this game work better, what is the path forward then? What would you say is the proper fix?
I will show you. That's what I'll say. I'm going to pull it up for you right now. Okay.
Props, man.
And because, and this, okay, let's see here. Is this fully like in view?
Just the middle.
Just the middle?
Basically
like,
where your scroll bar is.
Okay, so it's a whole black screen. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Oh shit. Sorry. Paintbrush. White. Okay, is this? Can you see this?
Yeah.
Can you see this?
Barely. Yes.
Barely. Okay. Can you see this?
No.
Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. That's.
Am I blind?
Sure.
Is
No.
my eyesight okay? Am I good,
No,
doctor?
no. I just want to know what frame I'm drawing in, so I don't draw off the frame, and then you're like, well, I can't see what you're doing. Okay, so it's really simple. We are fighting with balls in space because we're fighting in 6 degrees of freedom.
Space balls, would you say?
We have been in space balls this whole time. This whole time, Keaton. So, unlike other games, these balls in space can go in any direction at any time. Okay? Now, some ships have directions that are much stronger, right? So they can go in that direction much better than other directions. But essentially, I can move in any direction at any time, and that is what my ball does. Okay? Now, because we don't have hit scan weapons, every ball has what's known as an effective range. Because geometrically, if we look at this ball here, let's just change the color here. Move that here. So this ball here has an effective range of, let's say, this. Okay? And this ball here has an effective range of this. And that effective range is directly in correspondence with the velocity of the projectile that they are shooting. Okay? I want to be very clear with that. The range of a ship is not dictated on the distance at which the projectile exists, but based off the velocity that the projectile covers in a space of time. So what happens is if you're in ship number 1 here and this big red ball is moving, is moving in this direction. Here, paintbrush. This big red ball is moving over this way. Okay, so in 2 seconds, right, he's moved from here to here. Okay, that lead pip is going to track him through that, and it's going to assume that in the next 2 seconds, he's going to be here. So the lag pip will say, you are here. and you're going to be here, which gives us an angle of this. Okay? That angle is what your computer gives to you on your lag or lead pip targeting system. Are you following me here, or have I lost you?
Yeah, I just feel like I'm back in geometry class though.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm going to try and make it fun for you, right? Now, if I shoot at him outside of this effective range zone, then by the time the projectile gets to here, I might have chosen to change my angle to say, you know what, I want to go over this way actually. And now the predicted impact point goes over here. And so that shot will fly right past. So I have to have a velocity that's equal to the distance of the change. To put it in layman's terms, if he's going to move on me and move from left to right or up, down, or wherever he goes, okay? And the thing is, with space, you can always move based off of your target. So if there's two balls in space, and I know that there's a guy behind me, if there's a guy here and a guy here, then it's not like it's an airplane where I can only go, oh, God's sake. It's not like it's an airplane where I can go, I have to choose. I can either go this way, or this way. Do you see those three routes?
Yeah.
Okay. But in space, if I know he's behind me, I can always choose the direction that's going to create the largest angle immediately, because I can just strafe up in this case. Which then it always comes down to the effective range. Because if I'm moving up, down, right, left, wherever I go, it's always in relation to the person I'm moving against, because in space, I can move in any direction at any time. Okay? This fundamental geometric issue is the problem to so many issues with the flight model. Because what happens is your big, gargantuous, multi-crew behemoth is the size of a frickin' football field. It's this frickin' big. Okay? And you have little fighters that are this big, okay, shooting at big ships like that. And that big ass ship, in 2 seconds, you know where it's going to be? It's going to be about 10 meters in this direction. So it's going to be about here. So
it's not moving very far, yeah.
So I don't even have to, so the pip would have gone from here to here, which is still physically inside the three-dimensional body of the ship because it's just so friggin' big. That's why having a physically large ship in space is a big problem, because the bigger you are, the easier you are to hit and the farther away I can hit you. Okay? To use an extreme example, if I'm in space, is it easier to hit a satellite at 100,000 meters or the moon?
The moon, preferably, probably, yeah. I would think,
because the moon is what? Bigger, right? Big thing, easy to hit. You know, they say can't hit the broadside of a barn. And that's a geometric issue, because what they've done is they've let art-driven design basically run the show, and they haven't identified this issue. And they say, oh, Master Mode's Maelstrom will fix this. Okay, well, that doesn't, because that just means that the ship that engages the bigger one, it just means that I have to shoot at it longer to get through the armor. That's all it means.
Right. And there are, I think, a couple different complications there, armor being one of them, but also the idea that components are where we should be aiming more in the future than ships themselves, right? If this is a large piece of ship, if there are small pinpoints on that ship that you're actually supposed to be hitting in terms of weak spots or components, that's still giving you something to aim at that's more, specific, asking for more precision than just the entire broadside of a destroyer.
Sure. But it's still, I can still pick you off. I even have precision mode now, which automatically gimbals my guns, because it's not about the target acquisition. It's about the velocity of the projectile.
I understand that, but this is a problem you said has been in the game since the beginning.
The very beginning, because we're making ships in space, and Chris wants to make his dogfighter game, and they don't mesh together. You got to lean into one.
But they've never even gotten close to introducing armor to the game or components to the game or precision mode, as you say. They're adding more of these things. They're Halo 2ing it, right? They're adding more things to complex.
But it doesn't solve the problem, because it just means I have to engage you for slightly, like, put it to you this way. So let's say armor gets in the game. By the way, it's already in the game, just an FYI, right? Because if I shoot a Hornet, I do 40% less damage with ballistics because it's a modifier. So Maelstrom,
Maelstrom is where it really gets real.
Right, but even if Maelstrom is in the game, okay, what is that going to do to combat? Is it going to make it so that light ships don't have enough penetration power to get through the armor? Is that correct?
Assumedly.
Okay, so what size gun would have enough? Like, that's the thing, is like, you're not solving the problem. You're just pushing it to a different state, right? Now, you could, you could take an Ares Inferno with a size 7 anti-capital ship gun and do the exact same thing I'm showing you right here. Stay at long range, do a bit of movement, shoot, saturate until eventually the guy dies. I can do that right now all day. So unless you're going to make size 7 anti-capital ship guns not effective on Maelstrom, you're not solving the geometric issue.
But I mean, that's what makes the Inferno special, no?
Okay, so then what happens when a fighter just does the same thing to that Inferno that you just did to that other big ship? What you've created is you've created the same geometric problem shifted to a different state.
But
so
the Inferno is as small as the fighter.
The fighter is significantly smaller than the Inferno, which means the Inferno will always be...
I mean, the difference between the fighter and the Inferno and the big ship is nowhere near the difference between the fighter and the Inferno, right?
I'd say the Arrow, let's say, for example, is about a third the size of an Inferno. Would you agree?
You can't ask me that. I have no idea what the size of those ships are.
Because it's pretty close. It's pretty close.
Sure,
someone can, I'm sure someone will check my math. Well, like, dang, it's at 2.76% or something like that, right?
You got to get your volume right, man.
Right? It's probably around the same ratio as an Inferno to a Constellation. And I can outrange a Connie all day. So you have more extreme examples in terms of size differentials. Like an Inferno to a Hammerhead is the same compared to an Archimedes and a Corsair. That's the same ratio.
Okay.
Right? So it's the exact same range control problem, just between two different vessels, right?
Yeah. I'm hearing you there. But that's like getting into the details of balance again. How do you solve the overall problem?
That's a fundamental game design geometrical problem, because what's happening is the ship that's smaller, that's out of range, will never get hit by the ship that it can hit. So what you've created is you've created an environment where, and they say, oh, light fighter meta. Well, because the smaller you are, the more effective you become. So theoretically, the best fighters in the game are Archimedes. They're tiny. If you have lots of them, it just becomes a question of how many of these do I have to bring to the table to just win every battle all the time.
What if those ships do no damage against your Polaris?
Right. So then what you do is you find the ship that can do the damage. That's the smallest version of that. So for example, let's say size 4 guns, which are on a lot of multi-crew ships, probably going to be quite effective at taking out armor. So the Talon has 2 size 4 guns.
But then what if
Hornet has size 4 guns?
The Polaris launches 2 arrows out of its hangar.
Okay, but you're not solving the problem, because if those arrows die, then that Polaris is certainly going, like, it's certain death. If there are 2 or 3 Hornets,
arrow pilots, then
okay, but then what we've created is a game that only depends on fighters, and that is exactly what I'm arguing against, and what people, ironically enough, think that I'm fighting for. And I'm actually fighting for them, which is so ironic to me, because people are like, you just want the fighters to be the best in the game, and I'm like, you don't realize I'm fighting for you, because they already are the best in the game mechanically and like on every measurable metric. Your multi-crew ship is nothing but food for fighters.
Okay, so in your opinion, the problem is that multi-crew ships don't have enough jerk, essentially. They can't accelerate and throw off pips fast enough?
maybe I'll rephrase it this way because no. So jerk is the relation to how fast the ship responds in terms of let's say you're driving a big truck. Actually, you know what? Better you're driving a warthog. What's more snappy, a warthog or what's that little Covenant weird looking bug?
The Ghost.
Speeder. The Ghost. What's more responsive?
The Ghost.
The Ghost. Okay, so the Ghost has a lower jerk profile than the Warthog. The Warthog's a little weightier. You can't really like switch around with it. You kind of just have to flow into your movements. The Ghost, you can kind of be a little quick and move around, right? So a light fighter would have low jerk, and a bigger vessel would have high jerk because there's more physical weight to this. Now, jerk has nothing to do with the problem geometrically. That's a tuning issue that adds personality and skill set to a ship that allows the player to get the most out of it. Okay? But if you don't fix the geometrical problem, which is completely and entirely based on the physical size of the ship and the velocity of the projectiles at which it's firing, if you don't solve that issue, then we're not going to get anywhere.
So could they just solve the guns instead of the flight model?
The guns have a big issue with this, yeah. But guns are part of the flight model experience. So think of it this way. What affects one affects the other. Okay? So if we had Star Trek phasers on our multi-crew ships, fighters would become obsolete within 5 minutes. In fact, we had this with tachyon guns. Remember tachyon guns when we first?
Banner.
Right. So the entire method of how fighters evade fire is completely dependent on deflection in terms of how much can I move from one point to the next and then change that angle before the bullet that's getting fired at me can get to my location. And there's two ways to solve this. One, you get way faster projectiles. Or two, you get saturation where the bullets just spread so much. And if you go up, right, left, or down, it doesn't matter because you shot so many bullets in that space that something's going to hit you. Okay. And then it becomes a question of time to kill and size of gun and blah, blah, blah. Right. The problem is Master Modes has decided to go the route of high velocity projectiles for fighters and no change in geometrical velocities for larger vessels.
What if weapon range was also something that they were tweaking?
So if I was them, I would make all small fighters that with a size 1 power plant, and you see what you do is you tie the weapons to the power plants more than the actual weapons themselves. Because what happens is the weapons themselves become the meta, and the ship you're flying is just a platform to get those weapons that are meta to the target. That's all it is. Right? So what happens is whatever platform is the best for getting those weapons to the target is the meta platform. And what I'm saying is you should tie it to the ship hard points, to the ship power plants. And to be honest, I think there's a lot more fighters out there that should have integrated weapon systems that are physically part of the fuselage instead of these stick-on, stick-off gun systems. I mean,
want to customize my ship, man.
Well, I mean, you don't put big, goofy guns on the bottom of a fighter plane. Like, it adds air resistance. It's terrible for the flight profile. It doesn't make any sense. You would never design a fighter with these guns just hanging off the side. Like, you would have those guns internally mounted inside the system. You could still have customizations, but you just wouldn't have them hanging off the outside. I mean, even the X-Wing has integrated weapon systems on the wingtips. Like, it's not like they bolted them on. Like, they're part of the fuselage.
You say even the X-Wing, like it's not one of the best spaceships ever made.
It is. I mean, it's really fun. And it also makes a hell of a lot more sense for a pilot because you actually have some visibility to see stuff. But
I think, okay, this might be a hot take. It doesn't seem like and you've said this several times, I think, throughout the podcast at this point, correct me if I'm wrong, but master modes is not the problem. Correct. It is the balance and the aspects of the game that interact with master modes. Master modes is really just the switching of two different modes, right? This is the navigation versus SCM mode. It's the combination of slower flight speeds. Is it? What else? Yeah. I mean, besides the disabling of shields and that kind of stuff. Besides those two,
it changes the thruster model, and it changes the speed ceilings, and it changes the modes in which you switch between them. That's a huge change, and it changes the gunnery system. Like
But
it
essentially,
changes almost
it
everything.
it introduces two different modes.
It does introduce those two things, but there's a lot more going on than just like there's a fundamental shift in how the system functions compared to the old one.
Right. But it's not like it is making it so that suddenly thrust works differently, right? You still.
Oh, it does. Much different.
How so?
Because what you're doing is you're hitting a lot of speed ceilings and you're not able to trichord like you used to. So you don't have
Right,
additive movement.
The old tricording. Oh my God.
That's a it's a hot topic because it fixes a lot of problems and it also introduces other problems. And I'm honestly not for or against tricording because there are benefits and takeaways from the system. If you were going to design a system for an Xbox controller, tricording would be more difficult than what we have now, to put it bluntly.
I like to kind of play with an Xbox controller.
Look, I got them just like the rest of them. I get it, you know.
Don't hate, all right?
I'm not hating on them.
No, not you. I know people typing it out. Casual consoles. No, man. Controllers are nice. They're comfy. And I don't think they should be able to replace every control in a game, but I think they have their place. But do you think, okay, I'm gonna switch pace here a little bit. Do you feel like Squadron 42, which clearly a lot of the stuff that they are doing right now has been aimed at, and Star Citizen, which I think we should all agree is probably 3 to 4 years out at least from reaching its sort of like finalized systems. It's a lot of years, all right? We'll put it that way. Do you think they need to have the same system? Do you think that they can release master modes as it is on Squadron 42 and then continue to iterate on Star Citizen, possibly raise the speeds, possibly change some parts of the balance? Because like, there's entirely different forms of gameplay that's going on in Star Citizen compared to Squadron. You know, the ship sizes, even as you're saying, are entirely different for us. We're not flying a Connie when we're running in Squad. That would be very funny, launching a Connie from an Idris. But like, we're actually playing a different kind of game, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think at this point, but here's the problem that they have to make sure they understand is whatever system you create for Squadron 42 has to have some fundamental basis in the system that you get for Star Citizen.
Sure.
It has to be similar enough that you're basically going from training wheels to a bike. You know, like you're going from Squadron 42, which is this kind of on rails cinematic experience, which we're all excited for. I get it. But it's just a single player campaign, right? So you have to have a flight model that's easy enough for you to pick up with a controller, eat a bag of weed, be able to play the experience, have some fun. You know, you're not trying to
eat a bag of weed.
Some gummies, I don't know, whatever floats your boat, but it's just that's the casual, that's the max casual, max enjoyment, just having a good time. And I'm all for that. I mean, that sells copies of games. That's really fun for people. You come home from a long day work. Like I just got back from a 24-hour shift. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I just want to chill out, you know, to grab my Xbox controller, just kind of zone out, fly around, be like, haha, you vandal scum, and just have some fun. I'm all for that. But that experience works for the experience of a single player game, because if you bring that system into multiplayer, like what they've done with master modes, it totally falls apart. It just breaks apart because multiplayer is going to be at a level of competition and effectiveness, I guess you could say, that will completely derail whatever single player system you have. And the people that are really good at the system in master modes, if Squadron 42 doesn't fix these fundamental issues, like I'm going to walk through the experience solo in some ship that's probably never meant to pass the game because I can just exploit the range control issue and the geometric problem. And so, you know, mark my words, man, it's a big issue with the design, and we have to solve it, because if we don't solve it, no amount of armor, maelstrom, single player, multiplayer, it doesn't matter. You know, that's like creating a fighting game where you can't block, or creating an FPS game where like it's just like it's a fundamental part. You just have to have it. Like it's just
No, I understand. And at the end of the day, I think what I realized after this talk is that we need to encourage CIG to work within master modes to fix the problems that are there. I think, and you might disagree with this, scrapping a flight model that they've spent years working on, yes, would be embarrassing and it would be a bad story for the game, but it would ultimately be worse for us because then they would go and they'd spend a bunch of time on something else. And I feel like working within what they have introduced to fix it and make it better, especially after whatever it is that they've done with 4.0, and maybe we'll get, I'm hoping that after, I don't think we would see it before 4.0 comes out, but at some point an ISC or even a Star Citizen Live that talks about the changes they put into that, hopefully once that does hit, there is a lot more openness and freedom to talk about major changes to the system. Because as of right now, from what I understand, the engineering changes that have come in and the or not come in, sorry, that they've been working on, and the jump point stuff has taken a lot of time from the flight team to really do anything that has to do with master modes, and that has slowed them down and not allowed them to put anything out that we can actually actionably talk about. And like you said, that's what's causing a lot of the stress and annoyance in people, is that nothing has changed since 3.23, which is almost 5 months ago. Because
but you know what's changed? I'll tell you what's changed. I started to cut you off on that rant. I love you, buddy. I'm sorry. People have played the experience of master modes for the last couple months, and a lot of people are getting to that point, and that's what's changed. Is they've reached that ceiling really quickly. They've reached that glass ceiling. They've played the experience, and they're just like, I don't like, this isn't what I thought it was. And that's what's happening. Is why are thousands and thousands and thousands of people just like flooding Spectrum, read all this stuff, and basically being like, yeah, this wasn't what I thought it was. Because a lot of folks were initially like, oh, A1, you just want a dogfight. And I get that. I totally get it. I mean, I totally understand that point of view. But it's like the whole I told you so thing. It's like, I told you this was going to happen, and this is exactly what happened. I even called it. I said, after a couple months, people are going to get sick and tired of this, and they're going to be like, this isn't holding my interest. This isn't holding my excitement. How do you expect this game to survive 10 years or more if the game is boring after like a couple months of people playing the experience?
the same reason people have trouble with the cargo hauling right now, because there's just not enough in the game for it to be fun.
Yeah, but the question becomes why those changes got made. Like, whose idea was it to make some of those cargo changes? Like, why haven't we? And that's the thing, is like, how many times do you have to? We were talking about this before the podcast started. Like, I'm trying to like draw between the lines here. How many times do you have to make mistakes before people go like, "Okay, what's the deal, guys? Like, can we not, like, can we have a frank conversation about design? Because there's no reason after 10 years we have this poor of a state with cargo hauling. Like, it's not
Well,
rocket science."
I wouldn't say it's poor. I think they've actually finally hit something good.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't feel that way at all.
Well, I mean,
I don't
and
do a lot of
that's the
cargo
thing is
hauling.
we will
I'll
always,
agree.
everybody's going to have different opinions on what works and what doesn't. But I think that they finally actually hit something that's similar to what they told us they were going to do with cargo hauling. And there are plenty of things to be said about the times that it might take, the money that you might get paid for that kind of stuff. But the actual fundamental idea of cargo being loaded and how it benefits which ship you have, that's hugely important to the game, in my opinion. And there will be people who hate that. But there will be people who hate the flight model also, no matter what.
Yeah, I totally get that. But like, we'll never get a perfect flight model. And like I said, the game is so far off the game that I would design. That's totally fine. If this is the game they're going to make, then I'm going to play it to the absolute limit that I can. But it's like, they make the old flight model, and then I say, okay, this isn't the game I would make, but the one that you have made, these are some really good things that you could do to make it really good. And then they go like, whatever, we're just gonna start again. And then they come up with master modes, and we all play it, and then I go, okay, well, this isn't what I would make, but it doesn't matter because this is what it is, and there's still some fun in there. But this is what I would change. and then they go, we're gonna start again, and it's been like that for 4 different cycles,
Yeah.
4 different people. I've seen each of the devs. I remember when John Pritchett and I used to talk about
Oh man, I was
the
trying not to.
original so here's the thing with John,
JP.
and I really genuinely love that man. Like, he is so intelligent. But John Pritchett, as you know, to quote one of my friends, he goes, John Pritchett's the guy that'll put triangular wheels on a car because it's cool. You know, like, the guy modeled so many things, like physics wise, with the ships and displacement of weight and all that stuff, and first order motion, second order motion, like so many cool things that it was just too well simulated, that it was
Yeah.
taking up too much space, basically.
Yeah. I
Um,
think.
You know,
Yeah.
but I mean, I've been through all those different iterations, right? And yeah, I think just community wise, we're getting to that point where people are kind of like, I think we feel like those companies were probably when Chris was saying like, oh, we're building freelance or whatever, and they're like, hey, it's been like 3-4 years, like, do you have a game or not? And he's like, oh, we got to work on some stuff, and they're like, look, we don't have any more funding, like, you got to put it out. Like,
Dude.
it's kind of, I feel like the community is kind of getting to that point where we're like, okay, it's been 10 years, can we at least see some progress? And that's the thing, is like, we want progress, we want the experience to be better than what we had in the previous flight model, and it's just simply not.
One of my favorite things about this year and this time is that server meshing and Squadron 42 are both coming to fruition. Whether we like it or not, whether they're ready or not, this is the proving ground kind of time. And yes, 2024, things have been a little bit slower, but I do think like we are in that zone where these things do have to be finalized. And we are at a spot where, and like I kind of got at, master modes won't be replaced. It needs to be changed, maybe. It needs to be updated. But I don't think they're going to be like, oh, yeah, that's fine, but we're going to start over. I think they're going to take this feedback. I think that's a big part of what 4.0 might bring and what after 4.0 might allow for in terms of talking about this stuff and having an open dialogue. But I think it's just a matter of letting them get that update out first and seeing what direction they're going to go in with this, because there's no doubt they haven't heard the feedback on master modes at this point. And I'm not talking about the feedback like, oh, give us a new flight model. You guys ruined it. Kill this one. It's done. I'm talking about the feedback like the well thought out posts on Spectrum that are saying, hey, we understand you slowed down the velocities, but there could still be some more excitement here. Like, that stuff, I think, helps them.
Yeah, I genuinely agree with you. And like I said before, I also agree with them giving them time. And I feel like people have kind of, I fear that people are taking this point where it's like, A1, like, you haven't given them enough time to make the changes. And that's never what I've been arguing, especially in that last video. That was nothing to do with that. It was all to do with the fact that I'm okay with them taking their time as long as they understand what's wrong with master modes and that it needs to improve. But to claim the things they claimed is really what got under my skin. That's what really pissed me off. And it really did piss me off, because I felt like I was being spoken at by a company that was just trying to pull a fast one on me. And I was just like, like, can we just be honest with what's going on? And what scares me sometimes too is if they really believe that the things that they're claiming in those statements, like, oh, fights are closer and this, that, and that worries me, because if they believe that, they're believing something that's just simply false. And the problems that we experience, I guess you could say, on the experienced dogfighter side, become everybody else's problem when the game starts to like go more public. Because once people learn how to do things, and that's how, like, if you want to win, you just do these things, it becomes more and more and more and more and more of a thing.
Yeah, I don't want
Because
that.
nobody, like, do you want to just undock and go somewhere and just get murdered right away? No. It's just, but it'll become public knowledge. Like, all metas have a lifespan where nobody knows about it, and then like the first initial people do it, and then they have some massive success, and then people go like, wait, those guys are winning, and then they start to do it, and then those people start to do it, and then the meta kind of shifts and advances, and then the more people get involved with that thing, the more it starts to change, and the meta evolves. So what happens is, you don't chase the meta. What you do is you design the space in which the meta can flourish. And you have the upper limits and the under limits in terms of how that shape of the meta fits into the game. And it's just, yeah, it's something that they're going to have to learn the hard way, because what's going to happen is if they don't fundamentally address these things, which they haven't in any flight model, and it's not like they don't have the information to do it, they got to get those ratios correct. And if I was them, I would drop weapon ranges to 1,000 meters for size 1 power plant ships. I would drop velocities to 1,400 and nothing faster for all fighters. I would slightly bump the velocities for all multi-crew ships by 400. So if you have a Panther that's 1,400 on a Gladius, then it goes 1,800 on a Constellation. You know, I would remove all the auto aim BS stuff, the fixed assist, all that silliness. And I would really get the gunnery system in a place that makes sense. And then I would do a complete redo of the missile system. If we did those few things, man, the flight model would feel better as well, and people wouldn't be as upset as they are now. But
we'll see
it is what it is.
if they can work with some of that stuff to make it better.
Yeah.
You said during the last time we got into this, it was a podcast. We actually had Yogi from CIG on the show. It's like episode 146. You guys should check it out if you want more discussion on this. You said at that time that you felt like Master Modes was good and fundamentally made sense, but it needed some tuning for skill expression. Do you still feel that way?
Yeah, that hasn't changed. I mean, if you're going to stay with the Master Mode system, there's definitely some issues that need to get addressed. And they haven't made any meaningful tuning changes because, you know, they've made like, oh, they're going to increase the damage of the light strikes by 10%. And I'm not talking about making small changes like that because it's largely meaningless. I'm talking about fundamental reevaluations in terms of how the flight is tuned in general. So, for example, if you increased SCM speeds to 500 and then had afterburner always 100 above whatever the top SCM speed was. So a Gladius should be hitting 550 SCM, and then it should be hitting 650 in afterburner, but only in the forward and lateral directions, so that if you actually get a position on an enemy ship, you can hold that position. Because what happens is, unless the person is flying away from you, as soon as they turn their nose towards you, you can't actually get up underneath them, because you actually end up trying to get underneath them. And if they're quote unquote backstrafing, then you can't force a position geometrically. So the way we get around that problem is we have infinite space, which we're not going to do, or we have a bubble in terms of the zone that allows you to maintain a position based on the nose position. And that represents what you would experience in infinite space. But you want to get off the speed wall as much as possible. You want as much combat to happen off the speed wall as you can. And how we get there is, you know, we have ships that accelerate at a reasonable rate. So right now you go from 0 to your top speed in like 3 seconds. That's insanely, and I'm talking top like afterburner, you know? So that time it takes to go from 0 to 500 meters per second on some ships and 600 on like the Buccaneer is way too fast. Like you have games like, and I used X-Wing Alliance as an example, where you can go from 0 to the top speed of the X-Wing, which was like 120 in 7 seconds. And then there's a reason why that game feels so much more like so much faster and so much more intense, is because of those. It's the ratio of acceleration, not just, and it's all together. Like if you have really high velocity projectiles, movement means much less. If you have really low projectile velocities, movement means everything. And it's a big equation basically, but you know, we have to start experimenting. There's no reason to me why Arena Commander doesn't have 2 or 3 modes that have fundamental, completely different archetypes in terms of balanced choices. And there's 3 that people choose from, and they play all 3 and go like, you know what? This one's the best. Like, I don't see why we shouldn't have that.
Yeah,
you know?
I think that'd be fun. I think, you know, and I hope, again, that once they can get more time on this stuff, I keep saying that, but I realize that even after 4.0 comes out, they've got control surfaces that they've got to think about. and there's just like the flight team has a lot on their plate. So I do hope that they can put some proper testing into this and do something like that where they can give us full on archetypal differences in the way forward they want to move with master mode, so we could do more deep testing like that. That's why Arena Commander's here.
I mean, I'm down for it.
Yeah. All right, man. Thank you so much for this talk. And
You said you're going to be hard on me. You weren't even hard on me.
It's whatever. It's a sliding scale. I appreciate you coming in and talking about this, and offering some insight into this and maybe some into your own feelings on this. I most heavily appreciate getting to the point that master modes isn't necessarily the problem, because I really feel like that has become kind of just a tagline complaint for people as opposed to digging to what's actually annoying them about flight. I hope that the conversation surrounding the flight model expands. I really do. I hope that it can turn away from whatever CIG wanted to call their flight model to what actually the problems are, because that it makes it more easy to discuss, I think, when you can get into the details. Either way, appreciate you presenting this and just having a chat. Can you let the folks know before we sign off where they can find your own content?
Yep. It's Avenger One on YouTube, and it's Avenger__1 on Twitch.
Crap. I missed an underscore there.
Our Discord is always open for anybody who wants to learn how to play. And I do have it's called the Star Citizen Fighter Combat Fundamentals course on my YouTube channel. You can see they're like little blue blueprints. And it'll take you from not having any experience in the game whatsoever to having at least enough experience and knowledge to be able to genuinely dogfight and have some success with it. But always, Keenan, I really appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on. And it's important we have these discussions. I just want to say, for the record, folks, my opinions on master modes is just to be very clear, master modes is very salvageable, very savable. It's just we have to start getting to work on it instead of we're not going to get our old model back. It's gone. It's dead. Let it die. There were some fundamental issues with that old system that would need to get solved anyway, so it's good that we have a new system regardless. But we need to be getting some good feedback from CIG, and I'd like to see more focus on master modes in general. I think a lot of us would. I think a lot of the community and a lot of people in Star Citizen want to see a little more emphasis brought to the core fundamental pillar, which all game loops revolve around in some way, which is the flight of ships and how they interact with each other. So anyway, but yeah, I'm not advocating for the loss of master modes. I'm advocating for the evolution of master modes radically, hopefully very soon. That's all.
What you said there about it's gone, it's done. I think a lot of people need to realize that 3.0, the 3.x branch of features, are going away. We've seen it with the star map. We've seen it with the Moby Glass. We're seeing it with interaction system. Even in the ISC yesterday, somebody quoted one of the devs saying something along the lines of, what we had as for MFDs before was placeholder. It just worked. It made it happen. It's the same with the flight model. Everything they did in the 3.x round of stuff was just so that we could play the game, so they had a playable version for us. Even the underground facilities, all of it is being replaced as we move forward into 4.0 and beyond. Flight model is the same way. So I think we shouldn't be tied to the things that happened in the 3.x branch of updates. But,
we should be taking the lessons learned from them, and that's the things.
There's plenty to be learned there. Like those stupid turrets around the bunkers. Oh my god, we don't use them for anything.
Grimhex still shoots criminals. I'm just saying. It's really annoying.
Shame on you, Grimhex. All right, man. Thank you again for joining me for this one. Thank you everybody who watched or listened. For anybody who was listening, I hope you got a lot out of those drawing segments, which I'm sure were not confusing at all. But if you enjoy this podcast and you don't like the YouTube ads, you can always hop over to our audio platform, which may actually start doing some stuff lane soon. But thank you again for joining me. Hope you learned something in this. Have a great time in the comments section. I'll catch you next week.